The Galactic Empire's move. The galaxy was once a peaceful place, ruled by a fragile but respected alliance of planets. For centuries, the Galactic Empire had held power over many species, enforcing their will with an iron fist. But there was one thing that even the Empire could not control: peace. Peace was something that could only be maintained if all sides agreed to it, something the Empire often overlooked in their quest for dominance. It all began when the Empire suddenly broke the peace treaty that had kept the galaxy united for decades. This treaty, signed in the heart of the Empire's capital, had been a symbol of unity. For years, it had kept the peace between the Empire and the alien species it had once conquered. Yet, for reasons unknown to the galaxy, the Empire decided that the treaty no longer served their needs. At the time, many across the galaxy were caught off guard by the Empire's decision. They had always known that the Empire was ruthless, but they never expected such a bold and dangerous move. The Empire's leaders, arrogant, cold, and strategic, decided that breaking the peace was necessary to expand their control even further. They believed their power was unchallenged, and no one, not even the most powerful diplomats, would be able to stop them. News of the broken treaty spread quickly, reaching every corner of the galaxy. The alien species who had lived in harmony with the Empire for so long were shaken. Fear spread like wildfire. Leaders of planets who had once trusted the Empire now found themselves questioning their safety and alliances. Would the Empire invade their worlds? Would they conquer their people again? The questions were endless, but one thing was certain: the galaxy was in danger of falling back into war. Amidst this chaos, there was one person who could potentially change everything: a human diplomat named Jaden Greer. Jaden had spent years working in the delicate world of intergalactic politics, negotiating peace deals and forging alliances. He was known across the galaxy as a person of great skill and wisdom, someone who always kept a calm head in the most dangerous situations. Despite his reputation, even he was unsure if he could handle the situation the Empire had caused. The Empire's leaders saw Jaden as nothing more than a minor threat. Humans, after all, were a young species compared to the ancient beings who held power in the galaxy. The Empire believed they could easily ignore Jaden and any diplomatic efforts he might attempt. But what the Empire didn't know was that Jaden was not just another diplomat. He had a unique ability to understand the motivations of others, a talent that made him a force to be reckoned with. Jaden was summoned to the Empire's capital to negotiate a new peace agreement. His heart raced as he prepared to enter the grand hall where the Empire's leaders awaited him. He had faced dangerous situations before, but none like this. If he failed, the galaxy could once again plunge into a war that would destroy everything he and others had worked so hard to protect. As he entered the hall, Jaden's eyes quickly scanned the room. The leaders of the Galactic Empire sat at a long, polished table, their cold stares fixed on him. There was no warmth in their eyes, only disdain and superiority. They believed they were in complete control, that they were invincible. But as Jaden stood before them, a plan began to form in his mind. He would not be intimidated. He would not let them see fear in his eyes. Jaden's confidence was his greatest weapon, and he would need it more than ever in the days to come. The leader of the Empire, Emperor Zoreth, a tall alien with black scales and glowing red eyes, stood up from his chair. His voice was deep and commanding. "Human diplomat," he said, "you have been called here to negotiate. But know this, your people are nothing compared to the Empire. Do not think you can stand against us." Jaden looked Zoreth in the eye and spoke, his voice steady. "I am here to speak of peace, not war. But the Empire must understand that peace is a two-way street. If you choose to break it, the consequences will be severe." The room fell silent. The Empire's leaders exchanged glances, unsure of what to make of this human who dared to speak so boldly in their presence. Jaden continued, "I know the Empire believes it is invincible, but even the strongest empire can crumble. Your actions have already shaken the galaxy. If you continue down this path, you will lose more than just allies. You will lose your very grip on power." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, even Emperor Zoreth seemed unsure of himself. But then his eyes narrowed. "Enough talk," he snarled. "The Empire's decision is final. If you wish to stop us, you will have to do far more than speak." Jaden remained silent, but in that moment, he knew that this was only the beginning. The stakes had never been higher, and the road ahead was filled with uncertainty. But one thing was clear. The Empire had made a mistake, and Jaden was going to make them regret it. As he left the hall, Jaden couldn't help but feel the weight of the galaxy on his shoulders. The Empire had broken the peace, and it was up to him to fix it. But how? Only time would tell. The Human Diplomats Challenge. The next day, the galaxy was on edge. News of the Empire's bold move to break the peace treaty spread like wildfire, stirring up panic and fear across countless worlds. Leaders of other species, both allies and enemies, were unsure of what would happen next. Some feared the Empire would start an all-out war, while others wondered if the human diplomat, Jaden Greer, could truly stop the Empire from plunging the galaxy into chaos. Jaden sat in his quarters in the Empire's Grand Palace, preparing for the next step. He had expected the meeting with Emperor Zoreth to be tense, but the Empire's response had been far more aggressive than he anticipated. Zoreth's words echoed in his mind. "If you wish to stop us, you will have to do far more than speak." The Emperor had made it clear, words alone would not change the Empire's course. Jaden's mind raced as he pondered his next move. He had to get inside the minds of the Empire's leaders, understand their true motivations, and find a way to turn the situation around. But the task ahead was daunting. The Empire's leaders were cunning and ruthless, with years of experience in controlling the galaxy. He, on the other hand, was a human, a species that was still considered young and relatively powerless by many of the galaxy's other inhabitants. But Jaden had something the Empire didn't: a unique understanding of diplomacy. He had spent years negotiating peace deals between alien species who had been in conflict for centuries. It wasn't just about knowing how to speak. It was about understanding the emotions, fears, and desires that drove others. The Empire's leaders might be powerful, but they were also arrogant. That arrogance, Jaden knew, could be their greatest weakness. He decided to take a bold approach. Instead of offering peace right away, Jaden would challenge the Empire's leaders, force them to acknowledge the consequences of their actions. If they thought they could simply break the treaty and face no repercussions, Jaden would show them just how wrong they were. The next day, Jaden was once again summoned to the Imperial Palace. This time, he wasn't walking into the Grand Hall with the same sense of caution. He had a plan, and he was ready to make the Empire understand that they could not act without consequences. As Jaden entered the room, the Empire's leaders were already seated, waiting for him. Their cold, calculating eyes studied him as he walked to the center of the room. But this time, Jaden wasn't intimidated. He stood tall, his voice steady as he addressed the group. "You've made a dangerous choice," Jaden began, his tone unwavering. "By breaking the peace treaty, you have not only broken the trust of the galaxy, you have created an enemy where there was none before." Emperor Zoreth sneered. "We need no trust. We rule with strength. You speak of enemies, but who can stand against the might of the Galactic Empire?" Jaden's eyes locked onto the Emperor's, and for a moment there was silence. Then he spoke again, his words slow and deliberate. "You may have strength, but you lack wisdom. The galaxy is not as it once was. The species you once controlled are no longer as passive as they once were. You think you can break the peace and face no consequences, but the consequences are already unfolding." The tension in the room thickened. The Empire's leaders shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They had expected Jaden to beg for peace, to offer them something in return for their favor. Instead, he was challenging them, something no one had dared to do before. "We will not back down," Emperor Zoreth growled. "The galaxy will bend to our will." Jaden's lips curved into a slight smile. You are wrong. The galaxy is not yours to control. You think your power is enough to keep everything in line. But the truth is, the more you push, the more resistance you will face. Zorath's eyes narrowed, and he slammed his fist onto the table. Enough of your talk, human. What will you do to stop us? Jaden stood firm, his eyes unwavering. I will show you that there is more to power than what you hold in your hands. You may control armies, but I control the galaxy's future, and the future will not be shaped by force alone. The room fell silent. Jaden's words hung in the air, and for the first time, the Empire's leaders seemed unsure. They had always seen themselves as untouchable, as rulers who could never be challenged. But Jaden had just shown them that their power had limits. The next move was crucial. Would the Empire back down, or would they press forward and risk facing an unexpected enemy? The tension was palpable, and Jaden knew that the next few days would determine the fate of the galaxy. But one thing was certain. The battle for peace was just beginning, and the human diplomat was ready for whatever came next. The Empire's first mistake. The weeks that followed Jaden's tense negotiation were filled with uncertainty. The Galactic Empire, still reeling from the diplomat's bold challenge, began to shift their tactics. But Jaden knew the Emperor and his allies were not accustomed to making concessions. They were used to power, not diplomacy, and that was their fatal flaw. Jaden spent countless hours studying the Empire's movements. He knew that Emperor Zorath and his generals were confident in their control of the galaxy, but arrogance was their weakness. The Empire's belief in their own invincibility had blinded them to the growing unrest among the galaxy's other species. As Jaden dug deeper, he found something that could turn the tide in his favor. A splinter faction within the Empire itself, led by a group of younger, more ambitious commanders who had grown frustrated with Zorath's rule. These commanders were not happy with the Empire's recent actions. They believed that breaking the peace treaty had cost them allies they could no longer afford to lose. The galaxy was changing, and the old ways of rule were no longer as effective. Jaden saw an opportunity to exploit this division. He knew he had to act quickly. With the support of a few key leaders, he arranged a secret meeting with one of the younger commanders, General Lyra, a respected officer known for her military expertise and vision. Lyra was skeptical at first, unsure of how a human diplomat could help her or the Empire's military future. But Jaden was persuasive, speaking of a new kind of order, a future where the Empire would remain strong, but without the need for ruthless conquest. If the Empire continues down this path, Jaden explained, it will only breed more resistance. But if you are willing to stand with me, I can offer you a way to restore peace and keep the Empire's power intact. This is your chance to change the future, not just for your empire, but for the entire galaxy. Lyra listened carefully. Jaden's words were not those of a conqueror, but of someone who genuinely believed in a new way of leadership. He made her see that if the Empire continued to push its old, aggressive methods, it would only drive more and more species into rebellion. After a long, intense conversation, Lyra agreed to work with Jaden. She would support his plan, but only if they could convince the rest of the military commanders to abandon their blind loyalty to Emperor Zorath. It was a risk, but it was a risk Jaden was willing to take. Meanwhile, the Empire's leaders, blind to the brewing rebellion within their own ranks, continued their campaign of intimidation. Zorath, still confident in his strength, sent a series of threats to the species who had once allied with the Empire. He believed that fear would keep them in line, but this only deepened the alien species' resolve to resist. At the same time, Jaden began a campaign of his own, not with weapons or threats, but with carefully crafted messages. He spread word of the divisions within the Empire, making it clear that not all within the Empire supported Zorath's actions. He reached out to alien leaders, offering them a new path forward, one where they could preserve their autonomy while still finding ways to cooperate with the Empire. He used the general's secret support to show that not all military leaders believed in the Emperor's rule. Then came the first signs that the Empire had made a fatal mistake. In a moment of overconfidence, Emperor Zoreth issued a direct threat to one of the alien species that had once been a trusted ally. He demanded that they surrender a key system in exchange for their continued survival. Zoreth believed that his power was unchallenged, that this species would not dare to resist him. What Zoreth didn't know was that the alien species had already received Jaden's message. The diplomat had played his cards well. Instead of submitting to the Empire's demands, the species called upon the growing coalition of planets that had started to rally behind Jaden's diplomatic movement. This was the turning point. The first rebellion against the Empire's demands was a resounding success. The Empire had underestimated the resolve of the galaxy's inhabitants. What they thought was a simple show of force turned into a symbol of unity, and what had been a small spark of resistance now grew into a flame. Jaden's quiet, calculated approach was proving successful. As word spread of the Empire's first defeat, a peaceful rebellion of resistance against their demands, the balance of power began to shift. The Empire had made the first of many mistakes. They had underestimated the strength of those who sought peace, and they had pushed too far too quickly. Zoreth, unaware of how quickly things were spiraling out of his control, continued to underestimate the power of diplomacy. He saw it as weak and ineffectual, something that could never stand against the might of the Empire's military. But Jaden's careful planning and the alliances he was forging would prove that diplomacy was far more powerful than anyone could have anticipated. The stage was now set for the next phase of the battle, the one where Jaden's message would reach even the furthest corners of the galaxy, and the Empire would have no choice but to listen. The diplomat's bold move. The success of the first peaceful rebellion against the Empire's demands sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. For the first time in years, the Empire's grip on power was being questioned. Leaders who had once cowered in fear of the Galactic Empire now saw an opportunity to stand tall. The human diplomat, Jaden Greer, had not only shaken the Empire's foundations, but had also begun to unite the galaxy's diverse species under a banner of peace and cooperation. Jaden knew that the momentum was on his side, but he also knew that this was only the beginning. The Empire would not back down so easily. Emperor Zoreth, furious at the growing resistance, was determined to crush it. He saw Jaden as the central figure to blame for the rebellion. He would do everything in his power to break the human diplomat, to force him to submit to the Empire's will. However, Jaden had anticipated this. He had spent months preparing for this very moment, carefully planning his next move. He knew that if he could strike at the heart of the Empire's pride and power, he could force them to negotiate, to recognize the strength of the new alliances forming across the galaxy. The opportunity came when Jaden learned that the Empire was planning to launch a major military offensive against a peaceful colony, a world that had remained neutral in the conflict. The Empire believed that by crushing this neutral planet, they would send a clear message to the galaxy. Resistance would not be tolerated. The move was reckless, a direct assault on innocent lives, in an attempt to intimidate those who dared defy them. Jaden saw this as the perfect moment to act. If the Empire destroyed a peaceful world in such a brutal manner, it would only strengthen the resolve of the galaxy's inhabitants. This would not only be a military defeat for the Empire, but also a moral blow that could turn public opinion against them. He knew that the galaxy was watching, and now was the time to make a stand. Instead of responding with violence, Jaden prepared to strike at the Empire's pride. He reached out to the neutral planet's leaders, offering them a bold proposition. He would publicly challenge the Empire to a diplomatic duel, an ancient, highly symbolic event where a representative from each side would meet to negotiate a resolution to the conflict. The duel would not be fought with weapons, but with words and strategy. The stakes were high, and if Jaden could win, the galaxy would see that diplomacy had power beyond military force. Jaden's challenge was an audacious one, and he knew that the Empire would see it as an insult. They were a regime that ruled through strength and intimidation, not negotiation. But that was exactly why Jaden believed it would work. By forcing the Empire to accept a diplomatic duel, he was giving them a choice. Either they face him and negotiate, or they reveal to the galaxy that they were too weak to engage in meaningful talks. News of the challenge spread quickly, and the galaxy held its breath. Many species who had grown tired of the Empire's oppressive rule saw this as a chance to shift the power dynamics. For the first time in ages, the people of the galaxy believed that the Empire might actually have to answer to someone. The Empire, once seen as invincible, now had to decide whether they would accept this bold human's challenge or risk further alienating the galaxy. Emperor Zoreth was enraged when he heard the news. How dare a mere diplomat challenge the Empire to a duel? But the Emperor also knew that refusing the challenge would make the Empire look weak, incapable of standing up to a single human. He had no choice but to accept. The stage was set for the diplomatic duel. Jaden Greer, a human diplomat, was about to face the full might of the Galactic Empire's leadership in a contest of words and strategy. The stakes couldn't have been higher. If Jaden succeeded, the Empire's power would be irrevocably diminished. If he failed, the galaxy would fall deeper into the Empire's grasp. The duel took place in a grand hall, broadcasted across the galaxy for all to witness. Representatives of countless species watched with bated breath, eager to see how this human would fare against the Empire's leaders. As the duel began, Jaden spoke calmly but firmly. "The Empire has always believed that power is the key to control," he said. "But there is another way. A way that does not require the subjugation of others. A way where every species, no matter how small, has the right to determine its own future. That is the path to true power." Zoreth, seated across from him, sneered. "You speak of ideals, human, but ideals will not save you. The Empire's strength is what has kept the galaxy in order." Jaden's response was simple, yet profound. Strength without wisdom is nothing more than tyranny. And tyranny always breeds resistance. You have proven that today, Zoreth. You've proven that the Empire is not invincible. The resistance is already rising. The galaxy is no longer afraid of you. The Emperor was silent for a moment. The words cut deeper than he cared to admit. For the first time, he began to question the very foundation of his rule. Could Jaden really be right? Was the Empire's strength enough to hold the galaxy together, or was it only pushing the galaxy further into rebellion? The duel continued, with Jaden skillfully turning the Empire's own words and actions against them. He didn't need to outsmart Zoreth with complex strategies. He simply needed to show the galaxy that the Empire's actions were not those of a noble ruler, but of a desperate tyrant. By the end of the duel, the galaxy knew who had won. Jaden had exposed the Empire's greatest weakness, their inability to see the power of unity, diplomacy, and peace. The Emperor had been forced to confront the reality that his rule could not last forever. As the duel concluded, Jaden stood tall, his message clear. The Empire's arrogance had led them to make a crucial mistake. They had underestimated the strength of diplomacy, the power of a united galaxy, and the resilience of a human diplomat who would not back down. The question now was not whether the Empire would continue its rule, but how much longer they could hold on before the galaxy, inspired by Jaden's bold move, would demand change. The Empire's regret. The diplomatic duel had been a turning point in the conflict between the Galactic Empire and the growing resistance across the galaxy. As the echoes of Jaden Greer's bold challenge reverberated throughout the Empire's farthest reaches, something extraordinary began to happen. The Empire, once seen as an unstoppable force, now found itself facing unprecedented doubt. Emperor Zoreth, though enraged by the outcome of the duel, couldn't shake the feeling that something inside the Empire had shifted. Jaden had not only won the hearts of the galaxy's citizens, but he had also exposed the true vulnerability of the Empire. The once fearsome leaders of the Empire now faced an internal struggle that they had never anticipated. They had underestimated the power of diplomacy and the spirit of those they once controlled. Zoreth sat in his private chambers, staring out at the vast expanse of space. The Empire's military might had long been enough to suppress any form of rebellion, but now the galaxy was stirring. The growing coalition of alien species, once afraid to challenge the Empire, now found courage in Jaden's victory. It wasn't just the defeat of the Empire's arrogance that resonated. It was the realization that the people of the galaxy could unite against the Empire, and they had a leader in Jaden Greer who was willing to fight for their future. "I will not be made a fool of by a mere diplomat," Zoreth muttered to himself, his hands clenched in anger. This human and his supporters must be crushed. But as he gathered his top military commanders to discuss a counterattack, the cracks within the Empire's own ranks began to show. General Lyra, the young commander Jaden had met with earlier, was present at the meeting, and she couldn't hide the discomfort in her expression. The Empire had once felt like an unbreakable force, but after Jaden's challenge and the growing unity among the galaxy's species, Lyra felt an unease stirring within her. She had believed in the Empire's strength for so long, but now she was questioning if that strength had turned into nothing more than tyranny. "Emperor Zoreth," General Lyra spoke hesitantly, her voice firm but tinged with doubt. "We've already seen the beginning of a larger rebellion. If we continue with military aggression, we risk driving even more systems away from us. The people are no longer afraid. They are joining forces against us." Zoreth's eyes narrowed. "You would dare question my orders, General?" "I'm not questioning your authority, Emperor," Lyra responded, trying to maintain her composure. "I'm simply stating the facts. Every action we take is strengthening Jaden Greer's cause. If we don't change our approach, we will lose more than just alliances. We'll lose the entire galaxy." Zoreth gritted his teeth. He was not used to hearing such talk from his own officers, especially one as respected as Lyra. He had always seen her as loyal to the Empire's cause, but now he saw the seeds of doubt growing within her. "You are too weak, General," Zoreth snapped. "The Empire does not negotiate. We take what is ours." Lyra stood tall, but she knew in her heart that the path the Empire was taking was one of self-destruction. She had seen it too many times in her life. Leaders who became so consumed by their own power that they lost sight of what they were fighting for. Zoreth's refusal to even consider the possibility of peace was not just dangerous for the galaxy, but for the Empire itself. The people were no longer afraid, and the Empire's military might would no longer be enough to keep them in line. Outside the Emperor's chambers, whispers of dissent had begun to spread. High-ranking officers, once loyal to Zoreth, began to question their roles in the Empire's growing tyranny. The message from Jaden's diplomatic duel had been clear. Peace was possible, and it was something worth fighting for. The galaxy was changing, and Zoreth's grip on power was slipping. Back on the front lines, Jaden knew that the tide was beginning to turn. He had already seen the effects of his actions. Alien species that had once cowered in fear now spoke openly about the Empire's corruption. The rebellion that had once been a small, desperate movement was now a full-fledged resistance, and its ranks were swelling with supporters. Jaden received word that several high-ranking military officials within the Empire had secretly pledged their support for his cause. It was a pivotal moment. If he could gain the support of the Empire's own military leaders, the balance of power could be tipped in favor of peace. Jaden knew that he needed to strike at the heart of the Empire's leadership, and he had the perfect opportunity. He would offer Zoreth one last chance to avoid total defeat. The message was simple. The Empire could either continue its ruthless campaign and face the destruction of its military and political power, or it could sit down at the negotiating table and work toward a lasting peace. With Lyra's support, Jaden crafted a bold proposal, a treaty that would offer the Empire a chance to change, to move away from conquest and toward cooperation. The message was sent directly to Zoreth's command, challenging him to consider the consequences of his actions. It was a final chance for the Empire to avoid a complete collapse. As Jaden awaited a response, the galaxy held its breath. The Empire had made its first grave mistake by underestimating humanity's ability to resist and fight for peace. Now, with the rebellion gaining strength and the military divided, the Empire had one last opportunity to salvage what was left of its power. Would they take it, or would they face the full force of the galaxy's united resistance, led by a human diplomat who had made them regret every decision that had brought them to this point? Only time would tell. A new peace is born. The message Jaden Greer had sent to Emperor Zoreth wasn't just a proposal. It was a turning point, a final offer to the Empire. The Empire now stood at a crossroads. Would they continue their path of aggression, pushing further into the galaxy, or would they heed Jaden's warning and take the difficult but necessary step toward peace? Days passed, and the tension in the galaxy reached its peak. The news of the Empire's internal struggles, of the rebellion's victories, and of Jaden's bold proposal spread like wildfire. The once feared Empire was now on the defensive, and Zoreth found himself caught between his pride and the weight of his Empire's crumbling foundation. It was General Lyra who finally made the difference. After much internal debate, she made the fateful decision to reach out to Jaden. She knew the time for blind loyalty to Zoreth had passed. The Empire, as it was, could not continue. Lyra secretly arranged a meeting with Jaden, the two leaders of opposing sides standing in stark contrast, yet united by a common goal: peace. In a private meeting on the neutral planet that had been at the center of the rebellion, Lyra met Jaden in person. Her face, usually hard and determined, now showed signs of wear. The years of loyalty to the Empire had taken their toll, but standing before Jaden, she found hope again. "I've come to help you," Lyra said quietly. "I can no longer stand with Zoreth. The galaxy is changing, and I don't believe the Empire can control it anymore. If we're going to have peace, we must start by taking Zoreth down." Jaden's expression softened, his calm demeanor masking the gravity of the situation. He had long known that the only way forward was to unite those within the Empire who sought a different path. Lyra was a key piece in this puzzle. "Then we must make our move carefully," Jaden replied. "We'll present the Empire with an ultimatum. One final chance to embrace peace or face total destruction. Together, we can show Zoreth and the rest of the Empire that the galaxy will no longer live under tyranny." They devised a plan, a proposal that would offer the Empire a way to save face, to transition from a military dictatorship to a cooperative alliance of systems. Jaden and Lyra agreed that Zoreth must be removed from power, but the transition had to be smooth to avoid further bloodshed. The next step was to deliver this message directly to the Emperor. Jaden's heart pounded as the galaxy held its breath. Would Zoreth reject the proposal and plunge the galaxy into a final, devastating war? Or would he recognize the growing tide of resistance and make the decision to negotiate? The message was sent, an offer of peace, a proposal to dismantle the Empire's control, and a path forward that involved shared leadership between the various species of the galaxy. Zoreth's reply came swiftly, but it was not what anyone expected. In a sudden, unexpected turn of events, Zoreth announced his abdication. The Emperor, realizing that he could not maintain his iron grip on power any longer, stepped down in the face of overwhelming opposition. The Empire, once a symbol of fear and control, crumbled under the weight of its own arrogance. The galaxy had spoken, and its voice was united. With Zoreth's departure, a new council was formed, one where each species, each planet, had a voice. It wasn't perfect, and the road to true peace would be long, but the foundation was laid. The people of the galaxy had won their freedom, not through violence, but through the courage to stand up and fight for their rights. Jaden Greer, the human diplomat who had started this journey with nothing but a belief in diplomacy and peace, stood at the center of this new era. He had faced down the most powerful empire in the galaxy and brought it to its knees, not with weapons, but with words, wisdom, and unwavering resolve. His legacy would be one of hope, showing that even the mightiest empire could be undone by the will of the people and the power of diplomacy. The galaxy was no longer divided by war and fear. It had been born again in the flames of resistance, and peace, though fragile, had been restored. And so, The story of Jaden Greer, the human diplomat who taught the Galactic Empire a lesson in peace, would be remembered for generations to come, not just as a tale of victory, but as a testament to the resilience and strength of those who dare to fight for what is right. The galaxy was healing, slowly but surely, and in the quiet aftermath, as systems and species began to rebuild, there was one clear truth that rang out across the stars. Peace was possible. It had been hard-won, but it had been earned, and it would stand as a symbol of hope for all who believed that unity could overcome even the greatest of empires.